All right, we're going to look at AP US History, topic 7.12. And this is World War II mobilization. So, military mobilization. So, we had the Selective Service Act that's going to be signed into law in September of 1940. And this was the first peacetime draft in U.S. history. It required men aged 21, 30 to 35, and that's later going to be expanded from 18 to 45 to register for the draft, signaling the U.S. readiness to prepare for global conflict. Between the draft and volunteers, nearly 16 million Americans served in various military branches during World War II. Also, there were volunteers for service. Even before the U.S. officially entered the war, American pilots joined volunteer units abroad. You had the Eagle squadrons who supported France's Royal Air Force, and the Flying Tigers served with China's Air Force defending against Japanese aggression. After the U.S. entered the war, these units were absorbed into the U.S. military. So that's military mobilization. Then we had industrial mobilization. So factory production. U.S. factories, unaffected by wartime destruction, shifted from civilian goods to wartime production. The U.S. produced over 100,000 aircraft, 100,000 tanks, and warships in record time. In Kaiser shipyards, workers completed ships in just 14 days. So you had something called the War Production Board, and that was established to oversee the conversion of industries to military production. It prioritized materials like metal, rubber, and fuel for the war effort. The board also controlled rationing and prohibited non essential production. And then you had the Office of Price Administration, and that controlled inflation by setting price ceilings on goods that people would buy and regulating rents. It rationed items like gasoline, sugar, and shoes, ensuring resources went toward the war effort. So then you had civilian mobilization. So organizations like the United Service Organization, that's the USO, provided morale and recreational support to troops. The Civil Air Patrol and Coast Guard auxiliaries supported defense efforts domestically. Okay, Americans bought over $185 billion in war bonds, which financed much of the war effort. And Victory Gardens became a national movement with individuals growing food to support the war. Women mobilized, so military service and workforce. Over 250,000 women served in military auxiliary groups like the Women's Army Corps, that's the WAC, and women accepted for volunteer emergency service, and that is WAVES. So you had Rosie the Riveter became a cultural symbol of women taking industrial jobs, with over 5 million women joining the workforce during the war. So propaganda like Rosie the Riveter emphasized women's roles in sustaining the home front, encouraging independence and participation. African Americans mobilized. So working in defense industries, approximately 1 million African Americans worked in war industries despite facing segregation and discrimination. The Fair Employment Practices Committee, which is the FEPC, addressed some of these inequities. So, for military service, African Americans joined segregated units with groups like the Tuskegee Airmen earning high commendations for their service. Heroes like Dory Miller, who earned the Navy who earned the Navy Cross at Pearl Harbor, demonstrated the contributions of Black Americans to the war effort. And then you had things like the Double V campaign, and that was a movement led by African Americans for victory against fascism abroad and to get equality at home. So Native Americans mobilized. So you had the code talkers in the Pacific. So Navajo soldiers developed a code based on their language, which was unbreakable by the Japanese. So this program marked a shift in the U.S. government's recognition of Native cultures and highlighted their vital contributions to the war. So one dark area is the experience of Japanese Americans. So you had Executive Order 9066, and this is signed in 1942. This order led to the forced relocation and internment of over 110,000 Japanese Americans, most of whom were U.S. citizens. Internees were given 48 hours to leave their homes and move to desolate camps, often losing all their property. You had something called the Korematsu versus United States. And so this 1944 Supreme Court case upheld the constitutionality of internment during wartime. In the 1980s, though, the U.S. government formally apologized and provided reparations to the survivors. So, continued migration. So, there's the second wave of the Great Migration. Many African Americans left the rural South for industrial jobs in northern and western cities. So, this migration helped reshape demographics and fueled the civil rights movement. So, you had the Bracero program. This agreement with Mexico allowed over 200,000 Mexican workers to fill agricultural and railroad labor shortages during the war. Despite their contributions, many faced discrimination and exploitation. So you had the Zoot Suit riots, so tensions in Los Angeles between servicemen and Mexican Americans wearing zoot suits led to violent clashes. Sailors attacked young Mexican American men while authorities often arrested the victims rather than the perpetrators. And that is APUS History topic 7.12.